Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we do now officially have a proper big boy ALEO ASIC. We're going to talk about the just announced IceRiver AE3. We'll look at the pricing, we'll look at the specs, we'll look at the shipping window, look at profitability, all that good stuff kind of compared to the others, see where it stands, as well as just talk about the implications of this ASIC. So more so than just, the fundamentals of this ASIC coming out. Because of this price, it is going to change all the other prices of all the other ASICs. This is kind of a game changer. Talk about other updates coming with ALEO as well. So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get right to this thing. So there's a lot of big things with this release, right? Aside from just the specs and the price profitability and such, there's a lot of implications here and kind of hints we're looking at, right? Whenever we see these kinds of things, whenever you see these big announcements, more so than just the individual announcement of the ASIC, like, cool, let's look at profitability, see if it makes sense, yada, yada, yada. Let's look at the clues that they're giving us as far as what to expect. Again, one of the big things that we always want to look at is we want to be forward thinking, right? We want to look at things not just immediately for what it is, but look at the implications of it, okay? So we'll kind of get into some speculative things there. But let's talk about this guy. So just announced today the IceRiver ALEO AE3, which we all knew was coming, right? For you guys who are newer to the ASIC game and how this kind of plays out, as soon as we see like a AE0 or a little box miner, we know eventually there is going to be a big boy iteration of that ASIC, right? So depending on what's going on, depending on the competition that's there, depending on profitability, again, they typically have to have a reason to sell these larger units, okay? And that's kind of the speculative thing we'll talk about here shortly. But let's look at the specs though. Pretty impressive unit. 2 gigahash or 2 gigaproofs. Again, this is zero knowledge proofs, 2 gigaproofs at 3400 watts. So very similar to all their big boy ASICs. Again, it's very easy to calculate with IceRiver just because, again, we have like the A0, which is 100 watts. We know typically they're pretty much right on the nose with their big boy ASICs that it's anywhere from 34 to 3600 watts, right? Typically 3500 watts is like that sweet spot. So it's kind of easy to guesstimate these as they come out, right? So in your head, you can run the calculations of what the theoretical big boy is going to be, and here it is, okay? So shipping is going to be November 15th to 30th, so this thing's not going to be here until December. The bigger news for me actually is the price. This price is a game changer. We'll talk about why here shortly. It is $6,000, so yes, it's definitely on the heftier side. Profitability is going to look good, right? Just because, again, this happens every time before it comes out. Realistically, you have to wait until once that unit is out and in the wild and we feel the difficulty change, then you can kind of get a better gauge, okay? So this is kind of the hard part with looking at these like individual profitability calculators prior to its release because it's not counting that, right? Especially with these immature networks. It's one thing with BTC and even Litecoin, Doge, Script ASICs. It's very established, so one batch won't necessarily have a massive effect. Over time it will if there's a lot of interest in it. But specifically with these guys, like this unit can have the potential to have a massive effect on the network. Okay, so it's a very big deal with these. You can't just do straight ROI calculations. We can kind of guesstimate, right? We can do an estimate batch like, okay, if there's 1,000 of these, we can do this and see what kind of effect it'll have on the hash rate. Is it going to just have? Is it going to be a fraction of that? Is it going to be half, a quarter, a third, etc., etc.? The tricky part here, though, is that it's been extremely hard to kind of guesstimate with ALEO because of that huge change in dynamics that they just had, right? Where they launched that ARC 0046, which has this staking requirement that is extremely hefty. Okay, so we'll talk about specifically how it applies to this guy, and this is something you really have to be aware of because it drastically changes the dynamics of it, right? Your cost up front because it is hefty. We'll talk about it here shortly, but overall, let's look at the current profitability. Currently, your daily income is going to be about 47 bucks. Your electric at let's put it down to 10 cent kilowatt hour just for comparison's sake. About $8.16. Your profit's going to be $40. Again, that's going to change massively once this unit comes out. Okay, to what extent though, like we're mentioning, it's really hard to say because I don't think there's going to be a ton of interest in this one. Just like there wasn't a ton of interest in those smaller ASICs that released not too long ago. Okay, so it's hard to say if it's going to be like 500 units, 1,000 units, 3,000 units. We kind of don't know, right? Realistically, if you're going to really be interested in it and want to do those calculations, I tend to go on the more cautious side and go on the worst case scenario, typically a number we've seen with a lot of these initial batches is 2 to 3,000 units. Will we see that with this guy? Honestly, probably not. Okay, just because I don't think there's going to be a ton of interest in it, just like there wasn't in those others. Now, so profitability and such looks great or whatever. Let's compare it to the competition. Okay, and this is where the big standout is, and its only competition is essentially just Gold Shell. Okay, and it really, just like from day one, wrecks the Gold Shell to the point where it's like almost laughably bad. Okay, so their big boy unit, which this is the second gen big boy unit. Okay, so this is not the first gen. They released 2 gens of this thing. Okay, for 3200 watts, you're only getting 540 mega hash in comparison to the 2 giga hash here. Okay, nearly 4 times the hash rate is what you're getting with this guy versus the Gold Shell unit at about the same wattage, right? 10% difference, 3200 to the 3500. Okay, this is why efficiency matters, because efficiency is longevity. The only way you're going to make it in the ASIC game is if you have that longevity. Okay, this is why I've been so against the Gold Shell units, because over time, they're going to get to that point. And currently, when this batch drops, very likely this guy will probably barely be break even. Okay, just something to kind of keep in mind there. If ALEO's price stays the same, again, that's going to be the big X factor also, is that we can look at all these things, and reality, the biggest factors here is what ALEO does. If it has any price appreciation, all this stuff drastically changes. Okay, and if it doesn't, or if it goes down further, changes for the worse. Okay, so that is also a big X factor, which is why we tend to focus on the yield and not necessarily the daily profitability. Okay, so instead of looking at the $12.98 in income, I would focus on the 56 ALEO you would get and what that could potentially be worth depending on your price point, if and when a alt season happens or just a pump happens, right? So those are definitely also things to keep in mind. That's just my personal viewpoint and how I view a lot of these ASICs. But again, this IceRiver unit just demolishes the competition, right? It's, again, borderline laughable. It's really sucks for anybody who purchased this unit, especially if you just purchased it weeks ago. Definitely going to be a crappy situation. Okay, so hopefully maybe ALEO appreciates, or I don't know. Again, you're just going to be in a bad spot. There's no way to like sugarcoat it. Again, this is the main reason we are not a big fan of Gold Shell at all. Just because, again, we know that this typically happens. Especially when there's a competitor unit around the same time. It's one thing if they're the only person in the game, like currently what's happening right now with the XT box and Tari. That's one thing because they can kind of control the hash rate. Not the case here, right? The IceRiver unit was announced not too long after with drastically better efficiency. Okay, so this is a huge X factor here. Okay, so just something to keep in mind and why we're so big on efficiency. Okay, and what we're talking about with the pricing, right? So this guy's going to be 6K. It's going to affect the prices of all the other ASICs, right? Again, the Gold Shells for me is not even worth looking at because they've been trashed from day one. Okay, which is why it's so bothersome when you see people shilling like the AE Max 2. I get it, people get it for free or whatever, but it's like, bro, like, that's a whole different topic. Let's stay on track here. So like the recent unit, and this is another thing, right? So it's not just, again, any bad practices we're going to call out. Okay, kind of same thing here with the IceRiver unit. This is really screwing out anybody who took the plunge on the IceRiver AE2, for example. Okay, so the reason we're saying this is that guy came out not too long ago at $4,000. Okay, so for reference, the AE2, again, we're going to ballpark these numbers, 720 mega hash. So approximately about a third of what this new unit is going to be. Okay, so if we compare it, if we compare the IceRiver AE2 to the AE3 comparatively, the IceRiver AE3 should cost about 12 grand, right? And that's not the case. What is it? It's exactly half of that. Okay, so realistically, the IceRiver AE2 is likely has to get repriced. It's not going to make any sense to buy something that makes a third of the hash rate for only 2 grand less. Okay, so realistically, expect to see a price drop on this AE2. It's currently, again, $4,000. It makes no sense when, again, this guy is 3x the hash rate for only 2 grand more. Fair price here would be going down to 2,000 would make the most sense, right? It'd be a direct drop, but realistically, there's always a premium for those smaller ASICs. So let's say 2,400, 2,500, 2,300, somewhere in that range. Another one that definitely has to get repriced is the AE0 as well as the AE1 Lite. Both of them definitely need to get repriced in accordance with it, right? So the AE0, for example, realistic, going to go down to like 200 bucks, right? Maybe $300. It just kind of depends on what they decide to do there, but it's definitely going to be a price cut. So as far as your potential ASICs worth, it's definitely going to go down, right? So people who made out or people who made X amount of ALEO, let's say you got that first batch and you sold it like last month, right? You're able to recoup your initial cost, because for the most part they were kind of selling around the same price range, and you're able to keep all that ALEO that was mined. That's kind of the hardware arbitrage game. You got to do that though before this next batch comes out, and currently it's already announced. So a lot of people don't pay attention though. A lot of people don't watch these YouTube videos, so you can go on eBay, potentially sell it. For the people who are uninformed, that's one way to go about it, but again, it's really hard to predict when these next batches are coming and how aggressive that price reduction is going to be, right? In this case, it's going to have to be pretty hefty, because again, it's just not going to make any sense to spend $900 on this thing. Because realistically, I mean, think about it. We know that each one of these little guys is 100 watts. This new guy is going to be 3,500 watts. So it's going to be like 34 of these things. Again, easy math. Let's round that up to $1,000. You're saying that the AE3 should be priced at like 34 grand. Does that make sense? Obviously freaking not, right? So definitely need to see a hefty price reduction there. And again, the part we're kind of upset with is that definitely screws the people who just purchased this AE2 over. Okay, it's just going to increase the longevity of that potential ROI with that unit, right? Versus like if they already know this unit is down the pipeline, maybe it'd be better to price things more aggressively in line with that, if that's going to be your plan to price that unit at that price anyway, right? Because we know ALEO's price point hasn't like changed massively. If anything, it's actually pumped, right? So to see a bigger decrease kind of gives us insight into something which we'll get into here in a second. Okay, so definitely not a fan of that practice either, right? The price just needs to be more aggressive. Okay, so the one benefit though is that because of this ARC 0046, there wasn't a ton of interest with that AE2. Okay, there was a batch that came out initially. It did sell out. There was a gap in between. I think the next batches are coming out now. Okay, and the reason we're saying there wasn't a ton of interest is because the hash rate didn't necessarily go up a ton, right? My rewards didn't drop so drastically. They did drop. I was expecting a much bigger drop. They didn't go down that much, meaning that the hash rate didn't increase as much as we had probably expected. Now with this unit though, things may change, but again, it's really hard to say or to have a good gauge of the interest. Okay, so far, as far as my little AE0, again, we did get it on release. So far, it's made about 1,800 ALEO, which honestly isn't bad considering the current price of ALEO, right? So currently, let's plug it in here, see how much it'd be. About 400 bucks. Okay, so did we make our ROI? No. Okay, we still have another month. Another thing to factor in is the price action. Okay, we did have recently a nice little pump, primarily most likely because of a lot of the privacy coins had a little pump with that Zcash pump. Okay, ALEO kind of being in that little set, so it did have a nice little pump. So at that point, if we were to sell at this price, we would have essentially just about broken even. Okay, because we can essentially just double it, because it's essentially double what the current price is. We'd be around $800, right? And at that point, you'd be just extra gravy. Okay, so again, that's going to be the big factor still, is what happens with ALEO's price these next 3 to 6 months, whether we peak here in the coming months or it goes all the way to Q1, Q2, etc., etc. That's going to be the biggest factor, right? So in the long term, wasn't expecting, again, that was kind of our optimist goals, to hit 2K before we had the major machines coming out, and we kind of made out better than I personally expected. Okay, so are we going to get wrecked when this unit comes out though? Most likely, right? Expect to see a hefty downgrade. So what's likely to keep people from really being super interested in this unit, and again, if you are, for whatever reason, again, I really wouldn't recommend getting to any ASICs at this point, but for whatever reason, if you are interested, understand this, understand the staking requirement with ARC0046. And as a PSA, just a heads up, the requirement does go up again. It goes up every few months. The next one is here in a few weeks. It is going to be November 1st, and it's a hefty one. It's almost a 2.5x. Okay, so just keep that in mind. For any guys who are on Whale Pool, make sure you also update your staking. The contract changed on Easy Staking. Make sure you do that in the coming days, because on the 19th it is going to change. You're going to lose your hash rate if you don't do it ASAP, right? Don't wait till the last minute, because that's when everybody kind of congests everything. You have issues, etc., etc. Do it when you have time. I would recommend staking the next requirement ahead of time. For those of you with AE zeros, you can do the calculation, but it's approximately around 380, 385 ALEO for this next increase. Okay, just awareness. So the reason we're saying though that this big guy, again, because the amount you have to stake in order to mine is going to be based off of your total hash rate. Okay, at 60 mega hash, really tiny unit. Again, this bigger guy is about 34 times that. Okay, so again, looking based off of this metric, again, the calculator on Whale Pool, I don't think has been updated yet, so don't go based off of that. Go based off of their most recent tweet, which is this, which they have it super easy if you're interested in this unit, just to get a breakdown. For every gigahash of hash rate that you have, you're going to need 6,410 ALEO tokens in order to get your full reward rate. Okay, that is pretty hefty because, again, this unit is 2 gigahash. Okay, so you're going to need to double that. So about 12,820. So 12,820 at current price, and that's with this dip, you're looking at almost $2,900 in ALEO that you got to stake in order to run this unit to get the full rewards. And every 3 months, it's going to go up. That staking requirement will be going up. Okay, so that is a very hefty amount. That is something you do definitely have to factor in, and this is something that is a deterrent. Honestly, it is, and that's the reason we didn't get wrecked on the release of this AE2. Okay, because it definitely did deter a lot of people, and this requirement is going to continue to deter a lot of people. Okay, because realistically, do they really need all this hash rate? Again, it's not typical hash rate where we're like securing the network. This is something different also. We're proving. We're provers. This is zero knowledge proofs. This is not something where you need, like other consensus mechanisms or other algorithms where we're providing security and there's an argument for the max amount of security possible just because it prevents things. This is something different, right? So realistically, there is almost an overabundance of hash rate or proving power on the network. Okay, so this is kind of a deterrent. It's also a deterrent to prevent people from, specifically the miners, from dumping, and that's why just a huge turnoff. I hated the way they implemented. I hated the way it was so fast. They didn't even give these pools a proper time to implement it. If it's something they would have given everybody a much bigger heads up in order to do, it's not the worst idea in the world. It's just, again, my beef with it was the implementation and the almost like disrespect almost, right? To everybody proving on the network. But again, that's hefty, and it's going to go up every 3 months for the next 2 years. Okay, so just again, to me, massive turnoff, right? Especially if we do go into a correction sometime in 2026. Do you really want to spend $6,000 on that and be forced to hold that amount in order to mine? And something that's only going to increase, right? It's definitely a tough sell. It'd be something if you're interested in ALEO for the next potential cycle. If there's a cycle, it's really hard to say what the hell is even going to happen from here. But again, for those reasons, for me, this is a no-go. Again, the initial cost of the unit is going to be $6,000. You're going to have to stake another $3,000. And that's with current requirements, right? And this is something you do kind of factor in. I believe it's ZK Pool, if any of you guys are familiar with them, if any of you guys use them. Let us know in the comments if you've had any issues. I believe they're the one that you do not have a staking requirement with them, that they were kind of covering it. I don't know if it's going to cover it the whole time, for how long, that is something, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it, just because, again, they may be covering it now, but who's to say 3 months from now they decide to not cover it, right? Because, again, if hardware does come off, that staking requirement does increase, right? Just like if the hash rate increases, in case you guys didn't notice, the staking requirement did kind of go down because it's based on the amount of participants on the pool, right? So a lot of things to factor in there. One other thing we're kind of alluding to, something where you got to look forward, right? So you look at the clues, you see what's happening. Okay, they're releasing this guy. My question immediately is, why are they releasing this guy? Okay, so that's where you have to kind of look at the bigger picture. Don't just look at this thing, look as to why, right? They're kind of giving us potentially a clue into their mindset, because realistically, does it make sense that they even are releasing this unit right now? Considering the AE2 is doing pretty good, it's doing 14 bucks a day. The competitor, again, being Gold Shell, is straight trash, right? It makes no sense to buy that Gold Shell. So why would they even drop this AE3, right? It kind of doesn't make sense. Like, think of it from their business perspective, like, why would they do that? We know and we've seen in the past they will only drop these larger, bigger units if there's a reason to. If there's not a reason to, why do it? Okay, so one of two possibilities here, right? Tinfoil hat stuff, but one of two. One of them being that maybe they got word that finally the Bitmain unit may be coming out. Okay, may happen, may not. They confirmed it years ago. But considering their lack of interest in altcoin ASICs aside from Script, I wouldn't be surprised if it just doesn't come out, right? But again, basing it off of looking at the bigger picture, to me, they have to have something up their mind, right? Either they're getting word that there's another competitor, maybe it's the Bitmain unit, or they potentially think this is nearing the end of the cycle and it's time to just drop it. Okay, but for me, it is extremely weird for them to drop it now. Reality, again, there's no reason to. Realistically, if there isn't another unit coming down or they don't think the end of this market is going to be here, in my opinion, they would just let the AE2 ride, right? There's zero reason to. Profitability is decent. People are overall, we're happy with it now because it's going to be worth a lot less. Maybe not so much, and they're going to be earning less, so potentially, again, not so much. So for me, again, bigger picture, tinfoil hat, something's got to be happening here, right? So just kind of keep that in mind also. Always be skeptical. Always look at the bigger picture. Don't just look at the immediate. You got to look at the bigger thing. Okay, so again, those are kind of some of the scenarios that are be possible. To me, it's extremely likely that one or the two are going to come out. Okay, so either they're basing it off of their assumption of the market potentially ending, or that potential pretty much fabled at this point Bitmain unit. Okay, but again, just another reason to kind of be skeptical of this release. Okay, so again, when we see things like that, it's like put your hat on, because again, we've seen examples of it. Even with IceRiver themselves, you guys remember the little Radiant ASIC, the little Arc Zero? Didn't it seem weird that they never released any other ASICs? Why? Because there was no reason to, right? There isn't a competitor. There isn't a gold shell variant. Why would they do it, right? I'm sure they have it done because, again, all these bigger units are just scaled versions of that unit itself. It's not like it's a whole new chip and the bigger one. It's all the same chips. It's just a different form factor. So from day one, as soon as you see that zero unit or the little XT box, there's already the potential to have that bigger unit come out anytime after. Okay, and chances are they're probably already produced. They were just waiting for a reason to release it. Either a competitor coming in, Radiant becoming profitable because they had a pump of some sort, or something else happening, right? But again, there typically has to be a reason for them to drop it. So that's another reason to be skeptical, because we know Bitmain typically beats them on the efficiency. Okay, so that's kind of where the danger is with all of these, is always that threat of the bigger, better miner. Okay, so with like Bitmain, for example, they could potentially come out with a better unit that's the same price, maybe better priced, or maybe not. Maybe they're in greed mode and they do have the better unit, but it's also 10K or something, or 20K, 30K, whatever. Okay, so factor all these things in, guys. Look at it. Again, for me, I've made my position clear. We buy ASICs in the bear market and we sell everything in the bull market, or when we're nearing there. Okay, so for me, just off of that assumption alone, it's a no-go. Looking at the numbers, also factor those dangers in. Not a super big fan. Again, realistically, you kind of have to wait to see how the hash rate gets affected here. The staking requirement is also a huge downfall. Not a fan of the AE2 kind of getting screwed over, although if we do, again, get an announcement of a Bitmain unit, it kind of makes sense as to why, specifically with the pricing, etc., etc. It's just very weird, right? Always a skeptic, always looking forward, but overall, guys, for me, definitely a no-go. Interesting unit, right? It's impressive, especially when compared to the Gold Shell, the existing competitor. But just for me, again, these are more financial products. Okay, don't really look at it from the tech perspective. Look at it from the financial incentive perspective. And for me, when I see this unit potentially nearing the end of the cycle, it's a very hard sell, right? It has to be a super degen play for it to be worthwhile because at this point, realistically, you do have a relatively small window in the terms of mining. Again, generally ASICs, you want to be mining on it for a year or two. Do you think this unit is going to be profitable for the next year or two, or do you think we're going to have a potential bear market sometime in 2026? Right? Look at the broader picture. Let me know in the comments, though, guys. What do you guys think? Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I am out.